Now that we have understood how the box model works, let's see how can we place those boxes around. So what we have seen so far, we know about CSS rules. We know how to use the inspector for instant feedback. We know that browsers behave differently, and we know that everything is a box. But how do we lay out those boxes? Let's see this example. This is lifetime. And let's remember that everything is a box. And for example, the header is actually full of boxes. Let's see. Okay, so this is the first box that has everything. Then we have these 3 boxes. And finally, we have these more 3 boxes. Boxes are laid out according to gravity, which means that they go up and fill all the horizontal space that they can. However, sometimes we do want to have elements side by side. How can we actually achieve this? So let's first of all try to change the width of the element. So the first block is actually like a menu item, so it has 100 pixels width, and then we have the second element that is also 100 pixels width. However, it does have space. However, it didn't go up. Why? Because when the element is defined as a box, by default, it tries to fill all of the horizontal space, or it actually fills all of the horizontal space. So the next element just goes on below it. So imagine that we couldn't put the elements side by side, we would have definitely strange menus. So the first alternative is actually to use a float. So if we use a float, by floating they are actually cornered. So it means that the first element goes here, and then the second element, notice that it goes next to it. Why? Because these two are defined as float, meaning that they know that they have 100 pixels, and then the second one knows, oh, okay, I have 100 pixels, but I still fit next to the previous float. So he moves next to the previous float. However, elements that are non-floating also end up going next to the elements that are float. And we are going to see why and what we need to do to avoid this. So the first thing is we need to apply a clear left to the element that we don't want to have to be next to the other one. Okay, and there is actually a technique called the clear fix that is very used by the front-end developers. That it's an empty div with clear both and visibility hidden, meaning that the third block, which is not a float, will not go next to the blocks that are floating. So putting it simple is a floated box is positioned within the normal flow, then taken out of the normal flow and shifted to the left or right as far as possible. Okay, and then when a box is taken out of the normal flow, all content that is still within the normal flow will ignore it completely and not make space for it. What does this mean is if we have a parent, a div, that all of the elements inside that div are floating, all of those elements are floating, the height of the parent will be 0 pixels. You probably came across with this on the exercise 3 when we were actually bringing stuff for the platform. Actually, it's not easy to understand this, so let's see an example. Here you can see that these two elements, element A and element B, they are float, and this one is floating left and this one is floating right. If actually you put this element floating left, what happens is that it goes next to the previous element floating. It tries to put side by side. And if we put right, it goes to the right side. Notice how the text itself, the content of the black div, which is a div that is broader with the other ones. So the other ones are not inside the div one. Look how the context is adapting to those float elements. It's just like the newspaper, where we have an image and the text next to the image. Okay, and this was the reason why floats were created, were to create this kind of stuff. What happens when we do a clear both on the content? It basically means that, okay, there isn't any element floating before me, and if there is, I want to ignore it. It's like they are not float, so it just gives us the space. This is how the clear and the float work. So we are going to find a lot of web tutorials using float. Additionally, we are going to find a lot of front ends still using floats. And one of the reasons is because some of those have been using this for years, and at that time they actually needed to support IE6 and other legacy code, other legacy browsers. So that's the reason why they are still using floats. But bottom line, what you should have in mind is that floats are messy, and you will end up a lot of time doing the clear and trying to fix that mess. There is a better way actually to do this, which is using inline block, which we can use starting from IE7. And with that, we change the display property from block, which is the default one, to inline block, and we don't use the float. This means that the elements that are inline block will try to fit side by side, and the elements that are block will just go underneath them. Simple as that. You probably notice the asterisk display and the asterisk zoom one. This is for the inline block to work on IE7. So now let's take another look, a different look to lifetime. We have seen that it has boxes that are occupying the whole space. So these are display block boxes. And then remember those small boxes that we have? These are the display inline boxes. Simple as that. Something that you should be aware is that the floats and the inline block boxes are fluid, so they adapt to whatever space they have. So let's see an example. So we can see that here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And remember, this is float. So notice here that the main content doesn't recognize that there are more elements. What happens when we start diminishing the window? Notice that the floats start to break, and they just go to underneath one another. Okay, something that I would like also you to notice is the HTML structure. So the elements are all followed up here visually, but in the code they shouldn't, because we have a line that has 5 elements, and then we have another line, another div that has the remaining elements. However, they just stack next to each other all. So let's see the same example, but using blocks, inline blocks in this case. So the first thing that you notice is that it's breaking on the 5th. So this is the 2 lines. And what happens when we start diminishing the window size? They have exactly the same behavior, that floats, with the difference that the main content understands that there are elements here occupying space. Getting back to our presentation, you notice that the lines were breaking. If we know the dimensions, meaning if the number of elements is fixed, we should put the dimension on the parent so that the elements don't break when we don't want them to break. If we don't know the dimensions, then we should use a CSS property called white space with the value no wrap. So in this case, the 50 is coming down, but we want it to be in line. What we could do is come here to the line and say that white space, no wrap. And notice what happened. It simply just extended the main content, saying that this is not going to break a line. What happened when we start diminishing the browser? Well, nothing. It just stays in the same place in the same way. So if we scroll to the right, because now we have scroll, the element is here all in line. Very well, let's go to exercise 4, and this is a no coding exercise, meaning that you should print the next slide and you should try to lay out the boxes, the content in boxes. So what's the solution for this? First of all, we will have these display box lines. Then we would have these display inline boxes. As simple as this. Let's move on to the next exercise. So what you have done in paper, let's implement that on the exercise 5 page. So hopefully you didn't have any question, but let's leave those questions to later on, namely the one regarding vertical alignment. So bottom line, you should try to think with boxes in mind rather than in tables. So here is an example. If we had to create a table to have all of these elements, a single table for layout, it means that we would need 12 columns at least, because we have here the layout is divided in 3, here is divided in 2, and then in 2 again, here is divided in 4. So it would be very hard to do this with tables. But if we think in boxes, it would be really simple. So if by thinking in boxes, if we see like this, these are the major blocks, and then these would be the smaller blocks.